Hey YouTube, this is Ian from Big Rock Moto. So the question today is, if you're a diehard fan of the KTM 950 or 990 Adventure and you've told your friends that they can pry it from your cold dead hands, is the 790R a valid replacement for those bikes? So that's what we're going to cover today. So I've owned the 950 Adventure. I had a 2006 black one. It was the standard model, standard height suspension, carbureted bike, last year of carbs. And then I had a 2010 990R. The R had the longer travel suspension and a super tall seat height. Of course, that was a fuel injected, larger engine, more powerful. The 990R I had was one of the most capable adventure bikes I'd ever ridden at that point, and I think still probably is. So the question is, if you're a huge fan of those bikes, what should you be considering if you're thinking about upgrading to this? How does this feel and ride compared to those bikes? And is this really a valid replacement? So that's what we're going to cover. So I really feel that this bike is sort of the evolution of the mission and the spirit of those bikes. What I mean is that it's a bike that's engineered for off-road performance first. So it works okay on the street, it works pretty well, and this works better than those on the street in my opinion. But you know, they took it, they designed everything with off-roading in mind, from the suspension to the placement of the weight with the gas tank down low, to the chassis, the electronics, everything like that. So I think that's something to think about. Advantages compared to the 950, 990 are numerous. This bike is lighter weight. The chassis on this bike is also better. So 470 pounds with 5.3 gallons of fuel is really pretty awesome. This bike does not feel nearly as top heavy as those bikes did. Now those bikes also had the fuel tanks kind of on the side and kind of down below a little bit, but this bike takes that to the next degree and feels lower center of gravity and feels much more nimble than those bikes did on the street and off-road. Again, all this is just my opinion. You feel free to disagree. This bike is easier to ride in almost every situation. On the street, it's more flickable. The engine is, I would say, at least as good as those bikes. It doesn't have quite the good sound of the V-twin, but it feels just as fast as those, if not faster, to be honest with you. So on the street, I think it's just as good as those bikes. The wind buffeting is about the same, maybe a little bit better than the 950 and 990s. The comfort level for street riding is just as good, if not better. And when you go to off-road, this bike is much easier, more fun to ride. It's more nimble, more flickable. You can flip it around easier on the trail, do U-turns. The power delivery, I think, is better for off-road than the 950, 990. The electronics and rider aids on this bike, in my opinion, are really superb. Of course, you didn't have any of that on your older 950, 990. I think it's a huge step forward for adventure bikes to have those settings. I find the rally mode really useful, where I can select my level of traction control on the fly, 1 through 9, the off-road ABS that turns off the rear channel and leaves the front active. On the street, you've got things like the cruise control, which is amazing for touring. You've got the quick shifter, MSR, which is motor slip regulation, which basically prevents those kind of skidding if you downshift at real high RPM. It doesn't let your wheel lock up. Suffice to say, the electronics, I think, are a huge boost to the usability and the approachability of this bike. This bike is going to be I think, a lot easier to service and work on. If you own those 950, 990s, you know how it was kind of a pain to get the gas tanks off. A lot of the filters and things were buried down inside there. They also had a lot of kind of built-in issues with them, especially in the early years. You saw a lot of water pump failures, fuel pump failures, different things like that with those bikes. You know, they had a really heavy exhaust that ran really hot because they had the catalytic converters in the exhaust. This bike does away with all those issues. Now, this bike may have some issues of its own, which time is going to tell whether those things are really serious, but we've already seen a lot of rear shock failures on this bike, so that's kind of disappointing, and we'll see what else crops up, but again, we'll have to wait for time to tell on that one. A huge advantage that this has over the 950, 990 is that this carries 5.3 gallons of gas, which is about the same as those bikes did, but the big, huge difference is that this engine is so much more efficient than those. I'm getting 55 to 60 miles a gallon in mixed riding on this bike. That's really, really incredible, and will give you a fuel range between fill-ups of at least 250 miles. Now, if you are coming off your 950, you're going to be like, whoa, you know, I get 35 miles a gallon, my fuel light's coming on at 140 miles. Those days are over with the 790R. Now, some of this is going to depend on how aggressively you ride, But even if you ride both bikes aggressively, this bike's going to be a lot more efficient. So that's a huge plus in favor of this bike. So the things you're going to miss about the 950, 990, it's a bit more visceral. The sound is better, of course, on the V-twin. But beyond that, I honestly don't think you're going to miss anything. And I think you're going to find this bike to have so many advantages. Now, I don't work for KTM. I'm not sponsored by KTM. I don't get anything if you buy one of these bikes. But I'm just sharing with you how my feeling is owning those bikes and other adventure bikes and now going to this. This is what I always kind of wanted out of something like a 950 or 990. This is the evolution of that. This does almost everything better. It performs just as well, and I think is going to be a better long-term ownership experience. Time will tell on some of the issues. Let me know what you guys think. Are you guys planning to replace your 950 and 990 with one of these? Do you think this is a worthy replacement? Because as we know, the 1090 and 1190, I don't know, maybe not. They really weren't the best replacement for those. So let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments. I hope this video was useful. Please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Ride safe, and we'll see you out on the trail. It was Dave.